So after all the horror of chapter 6, this chapter brings great comfort that God will protect his people. It does not mean that we will not suffer, but that suffering will not be beyond what we can bear. And if you know Jesus, you are covered by the blood of the Lamb. Judgment and wrath pass over you like that did the Hebrew people at the Passover. But who are God's people here? Revelation 7:4 and 7:9 raise the next major interpretive decision you have to make, because we read this in verse 4. And I heard the number of the sealed, 144,000, sealed from every tribe of the sons of Israel. So the 144,000 is very famous in Revelation and popular culture. In fact, even the Jehovah's Witnesses have an opinion on it. Who are the 144,000? Now, immediately after this, in verses 5 to 8, we seem to get a list of the tribes of Israel. Now, a dispensationalist futurist interpretation might say, well, this is clearly Jewish Christians saved during the tribulation who are being regathered. God is sealing and regathering his people. But after this, we immediately read this in 7:9. And John says, after this I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, with palm branches in their hands. So the question has been raised, are these groups the same or different? And this dispute is mainly over whether the 144,000 are Jewish Christians present and saved during a future tribulation period, or whether this group mirrors the one in 7:9 and seems to be the church as a whole. Now, as you can imagine, there's two different dominant positions on these groups. So some, mainly pre-tribulation rapture futurists, I'll say, will argue that these are clearly Jewish Christians, a regathered Israel in 7:4 to 8. And on the face, there seems to be no questions. Because after all, it says every tribe of the sons of Israel. And that certainly may be the case. Again, I'll point out the decisions you've made interpretively about the rapture or the tribulation, they influence our reading of these verses. Now, on the other hand, those who favor the other position, the post-tribulation rapture, church-length tribulation period, tend to see this differently. It's not monolithic, but they tend to. They would argue that these are the same groups. And again, if that's new, you might ask, again, why would somebody say that? Well, I'll briefly highlight just a couple reasons. First, people say, well, this list of tribes in verses 5 to 8 is unique. Like nowhere else in Scripture or ancient Jewish literature does this exact list of names reappear. The tribe of Dan is completely missing. Joseph is mentioned with one of his sons, Manasseh, not Ephraim. Second, the 144,000, they reappear in Revelation 14, 1 to 5, without any ethnic limitations, and they seem to have Christian characteristics. And then third, John never sees the 144,000. So we read in verse 4 that he heard the number of 144,000 sealed. He heard this list. But when he turns and looks, what does he see? He sees a great multitude from every nation, tribe, and tongue. So the seeing and the hearing is the same pattern we just read in Revelation 5. So the argument is basically this. This vision is intended to present the same group just described in more Jewish terms. This view tends to see the church as a new, regathered, restored Israel, the people of God. The Christians here have passed through this tribulation period, which he mentions later. Now, more could be said about each position, but you kind of get the point. Practically speaking, though, whichever position you hold on this, the main point is this. God saves his people. God seals his people. He protects his people from his judgment and wrath, no matter what position you take on this. God is the one who gets the glory for salvation, and we see this in chapter 7, verse 10. As the people of God stand before the throne with white robes, praising him with palm branches, we read in verse 10, they were crying out with a loud voice, "Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb." Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne. It is he alone who saves. Do you know him today? Have you praised your God for your salvation today? Salvation belongs to our God.